Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another video. And in today's video, guys, I'm going to be chatting about the man who divides opinions. Some love him, some hate him, some want him out the club. That's right, Mason Mount. There's been a bit of an update on his contract situation and kind of what's been happening there in terms of offers being turned down and what the future holds him. But before I get into it, all make sure you smash the likes on the video, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you haven't done so already. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and also feel free to check out and subscribe to my personal channel, The Blues Brothers, which will be linked in the description. But yeah, guys, let's get right into it then. Mason Mount, obviously, as we know, out of contract at the end of 2024. So this summer, he'll be heading into the final 12 months of his current deal at Chelsea. Now, obviously, you know, Mount's done well for the club during his time since he's broken in to the first team following that successful loan spell with Derby in the Championship, you know, and it's safe to say that he's done pretty well for the club. Back-to-back Player of the Year awards, which is some going. Yes, you could argue that, you know, sometimes, you know, the players in those teams haven't been that great or performed that well, but you've still got to be the best of the bunch, regardless of if it's a bad bunch or not. So you kind of like credit where it's due for that there. Obviously, the assist in the Champions League final, which won't be forgotten about, very important in that run. And he's been important in kind of key moments. You know, yes, you can point out to situations where perhaps, you know, he should have scored in the Carabao Cup final, etc., and things like that. But on the whole, he's been good for Chelsea so far. Obviously, this season things are very different. It's been an absolute disaster. He's been invisible. His form's deserted him, and it doesn't look anything like the player that we saw for the last two seasons. And you know, it's sad to see. Of course, it is, because you want your players to play well, and a Mason Mount playing well means that Chelsea are probably going to be doing well. So obviously, yeah, it is tough to see, and it's kind of tough to see when it's someone, you know, that's the fans have got an affiliation with, or certainly a large majority of the fans. You know, he's got a banner at the ground again, unveiled before the game at Southampton on the weekend. You know, he gets it. He's Chelsea through and through. He's come through the academy. He's been here virtually all his life. And one thing I would say is that it is important that you have those kind of characters in and around the dressing room. They're hard to come by. There's not many of them that get the club, get what it means to play for Chelsea, you know, really understand it, and it actually means something to them, and they kind of die for the club and do anything for them. There's very few of them. You know, you get the likes of JT that came through. You've got obviously Reece James, Mount's there. Ruben has come through at the club, but he's had loan spells away. He's not really been as good as those others. Neither is Callum Hudson-Odoi, but they're a really important bunch to have in your team. People that, you know, have that desire and that hunger to play for the club and do whatever it takes for the club on the pitch, die for the badge sort of thing. So, you know, if you were to leave, that you'd have to kind of fill a hole in that aspect. But in terms of Mount's contract himself, you know, there were kind of differing reports of, does he want 300k a week? I don't think that's the case. That 300k number has kind of been bandied about. I'm not really too sure where it's come from, but what is abundantly clear and is true, as I'll bring up on screen now, is that Mount has turned down contract offers, but it was confirmed on the Athletic Football podcast that actually by David Ornstein that Mount rejected multiple contract offers in the summer of 2022 and then in this autumn, so obviously before the World Cup. Now, Chelsea are very clear on this. He signs a new deal when dialogue reopens in the summer, or he will or he definitely will be sold. And what I like about this from the owners is that, as we've seen in the past, we've allowed players to run their contracts down and then leave on freeze, like Rudiger, like Christensen. Obviously, we got money for Jorginho, but he would have left on a free if Arsenal didn't come in. And like what might happen with N'Golo Kante, although reports suggest that he could be closer to signing a new contract. But the point is, you've allowed 4 key players to run their contracts down and risk losing all of them for nothing. And this new ownership don't want to do that. So if you get to the last 2 years of your contract, the policy going forward now, it seems, is that you either sign a new deal before you go into the final 12 months of your contract, or being sold. You're not going to be allowed to enter those final 12 months, which I actually think is a real positive thing and a really good thing. And ultimately, it doesn't matter how good a player you are or how much the fans love you. If you don't want to be at this football club, see you later. It's quite frankly as simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. Now, in terms of Mount, obviously he switched agents. So those multiple contract offers that were rejected in summer 2022 and again this autumn, well, under his old agents. He's now switched representatives. He's represented now by his dad, Tony. So obviously when dialogue resumes in the summer, then obviously like that'll be with his dad. So maybe that will make things easier. But in terms of the contract itself, Mount, it's been reported that he doesn't want to sign for that long in terms of 6, 7, 8 years, which is what the new ownership are looking to do in terms of tying people down. We've seen Reece James sign a 6-year deal with an option for a 7th. The same with Amanda Breyer. New signings that are coming in, Mudryk, Fernandez, etc. These are on long-term contracts, and I can understand why at kind of 24, Mount may not want to sign for the next 6 or 7 years. That will take you up to 31, the prime years of your career. You may look to explore other opportunities potentially. You don't know what clubs might come in for you, so I understand perhaps not wanting to commit that many years. I do get that. We've seen it with Harry Kane as an example. I'm not saying that Mount's got the same quality as Kane, but you've seen it with Kane. The fact that he signed that 6-year deal when he was 24, and he's made it very hard for him to leave that club in the prime of his career when he probably could have left for City if he'd signed a shorter contract. So yeah, just giving that as an example. But in terms of Mount, I think it would be a big mistake if he were to leave the club, if he was to be sold, just in terms of not because like he's like an unbelievable footballer, but just because I think it would bite us in the arse and he'd go on to do very well somewhere else. I'm not talking like Salah, De Bruyne levels once leaving Chelsea, but I think if he were to go to a Liverpool, for an example, I think he'd do very well for Jurgen Klopp, and it's something that we might regret. In terms of staying at Chelsea, I'd be all for him staying at Chelsea. Obviously, he'd have to earn the right on the football pitch by proving that he deserves to be a starter and rediscovering that form, because right now he shouldn't be anywhere near the first team on current form. That's absolutely clear. I don't think anyone can dispute that. But, I think he can be a very useful squad player for us. He can offer a lot to the team still, whether he fills in cup games, whether he comes off the bench, whether he rediscovers his form. And the fact that he's homegrown as well makes a massive difference to the squad as well, in terms of the kind of the homegrown quota that you've got to fill within your 25-man squad. So I do think it would be a mistake. But ultimately, if Mason Mount does want to leave the football club, then it is what it is. And we just kind of have to take that on the chin. And as I said, you've got to look at it both ways. Like, if he doesn't want to be at this football club, then we have to sell him and get as much money as we can from him from a business perspective. So, if you don't want to be here, then kind of see you later. But in terms of Matt, I don't know why he gets so much hate from the fan base. I really don't. He's one of our own. He's come through the academy. He's done a lot for this football club. Like, if you don't think he's good enough or you think he should be sold, absolutely fine. Just leave it at that. I don't know why we're seeing people just constantly singling out Mount, battering him, criticizing him. Players do see that sort of thing, and it's really not helpful when you're kind of low on confidence and a team's not performing well, you're not performing well. You want the fans to get behind you. Like, there's nothing wrong with thinking a player's not good enough and not liking them, but leave it at that. You don't need to go over top with the abuse, which in my opinion is what we've been seeing with Mason Mount. But in terms of him wanting more money, I've got absolutely no problem with that. It just depends on the structure and where he fits in on that wage structure. Right now, he's one of Chelsea's lowest paid players on 80 grand a week. And considering what he's done for the club in the last couple of years, when you've got the likes of Kai Havertz on double that money, almost more, Kepa on double that money, Ruben on double that money, and more, like, you can fully understand why you'd be pissed off and you'd want more money, and you'd want a parity with kind of the fellow England internationals like Reece James and amongst the top earners. It doesn't mean he wants to be the top earner in and amongst that region. So, I think Reece James' new contract was between 2 or 250, somewhere around there. I don't know what the base fee is and whether it's incentivized with performance-related bonuses, which I think is what the new ownership are looking to do with these contracts, a lower base wage with then incentives for individual targets and team targets, if those are reached. So I've got no problem with Mount signing a deal around 200k a week mark, 220, based on with performance incentives in there. I think that would reflect what he's done over the last couple of years, and where people are getting a bit kind of getting the wrong end of the stick, in my opinion, is because the contract negotiations are taking place in the worst form of his career. People are looking at his performances on the pitch and thinking, well, how on earth can you be asking for a new contract? The contract's not based on what's happened this season. It's based on the value of the player overall and what he can offer. We've seen what he can offer, so he just needs to try and rediscover that form. But for what it's worth, I do believe that Mount deserves a new contract. He shouldn't be an automatic starter, but he'd be a very useful squad player, and I think we could regret it if he were to move on to a Liverpool in the summer. And I think he would do very well. Now, that's just my thoughts on the Mason Mount situation. A little bit of an update. All will be concluded in the summer, one way or another. But yeah, guys, as I said at the start of the video, smash the likes on the video, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and feel free to check out and subscribe to my personal channel, The Blues Brothers, which will be linked in the description below. And I'll catch you again soon.